Welcome to the Above Center Leadership Podcast. I'm Marcy.
And I'm Allison, and this is our chance to learn from leaders who know how to get results while staying above center.
Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to another Above Center podcast with Allison and Marcy. We are so excited to have you with us on this journey today. We get to introduce you to Chris Slaydon. He has started a few businesses, sold a few businesses, and basically he's all around just taking names and kicking ass. And we love that about him. We are excited to meet him. So here, let's just jump in. Chris, could you give us a little bit of information about you and your background?
Sure. Currently, I am the president and CEO of Dealer Blue Sky, which is a marketing operations company in the automotive industry. Along with that, I have a couple of different interests outside of the automotive space in real estate, hospitals, and a couple other business sectors. Previously, before this, in my focus on the agency, I was owner-operator for a pretty decent dealership group that we had a pretty successful exit in a little small town in Vernon, Texas. And then started my career out of college. I started in the restaurant and bar business, bought a couple of bars, flipped them, went through all that fun stuff in the hospitality. Anybody who's ever actually owned a restaurant or bars, it's not the easiest business in the world, and kind of like let you cut your grit really quick on couple of successes, couple of failures in that, and then just kind of evolved over time and just kind of tripped and fell into different businesses, including collision shops and again, hospitals, automotive, everything else. So a little bit of eclectic background that we've had.
Well, you can't have an eclectic background and a success story without leadership. So we'd love to talk to you about, the themes of lessons you've learned in leadership, because restaurants, automotive dealers, doing the different types of things that you've done. I'd love to know what leadership means to you and how you apply it despite what type of industry or type of people you're working with.
So leadership means a lot of things to a lot of different people. To me, at the end of the day, it's really defined by duty. It's, when you sacrifice a lot of your time, happiness, and your just joy in service and duty to those, your customers, and most importantly, your employees, and you're doing it for a higher calling, a vision, or something else that you believe in internally. I think that we all make trade-offs, right? We all give a little bit of ourselves to get a little bit more of something else. And to me, that's what I call duty. It's that responsibility to the vision you set out and to the people that are along with you, that are coming along with you on that vision. So leadership to me is defined by that in a nutshell.
Love it. Is there a certain time, can you share a story about when you notice a style you have in leadership that helps build your confidence to go from, I've got this idea of starting a business, to then actually going in and either acquiring it and purchasing it or starting something? But how does that kind of give us an insider's view to how it works for you?
So I think everything starts off with an idea, or a better way to phrase it is not an idea, it's more of an agitation. So there's something that agitates you that goes, man, this doesn't seem right. And it's curious enough that you get involved in it, right? I think a lot of people sit around and they try to think of creative ideas or something that they can go into, they can monetize or whatnot. When most successful, really successful people, they'll actually sit here and there's something that really agitates them about a certain niche or marketplace. And not only does it agitate them, but they become curious enough to explore it more. And then they kind of fall back on, well, I have the skill sets, I have the ability, it might be within my circle of competence to actually pursue this because I believe I can do it better than most people. And it doesn't have to be a fancy idea. It doesn't have to be this innovative, crazy outreach, 10x return kind of idea that you have. It can just be like, hey, this system, this way of delivering something can be faster if I did X, right? And I think most people, they're always trying to, they're trying to go for the moonshots, right? When most successful businesses are built upon figuring out just a simple problem to solve it better than anybody else, and consistently solve it better than anybody else. And that's where I think a lot of leadership gets separated from the wheat and the chaff that gets separated is like, hey, these are the things and this is the core problem I'm solving versus just this idea that can get me notoriety or get me monetary gain.
So how does that look? So say I know you're the entrepreneur, the leader, the president, and you recognize how your company can solve a problem and solve it better than the competition in a consistent way that gets customer results. But now you've got the team. So there's always like the rallying cry around the work you do and just getting clear on everybody's role and how they contribute to solving that problem. Like how is it something like, is that how you create?
It kind of is like that. I always preach that when you're a leader, you need three things. You need a vision, right? Because you've got to be able to paint a picture of where this is going. And you have to have people that buy into that vision, because if people don't buy into that vision, then they're just going to clock in and clock out, right? You want to have people that believe the same things that you do, not just that, hey, this is a paycheck and this is normal life. If you really want to create really successful businesses, especially at the beginning, when it comes to more mature businesses, when you get like 40 to 50 employees, we've had up to 600 employees in different companies before. When you get that, yeah, you're going to have a very large percentage of the population of your employees. They're just there to make a paycheck. They've got their lives. They live to work, right? Or excuse me, they work to live. They don't live to work. But those entry level, those 10 to 15 first kind of gen employees, they've really got to believe in the vision, because if they don't, then what's going to happen is you hire people, the fidelity of that vision dilutes, right? So the more levels of people you put under, the more that vision kind of dilutes itself and it becomes more opaque to more people. So if somebody you hire 3 years in and their employee number 75 or 80 is not going to have the same vision statement or the same picture that the employee number 3 has, because they are not spending one-on-one time with you as leader. So it's critically important at the beginning of your journey that you hire for belief in your vision and underlying like integrity and skill sets rather than just now skill sets, right? Sometimes we look for people that fit what we need now instead of growing into the role and realizing that a company is going to grow with you and you don't know what you have. Most companies change dramatically in what they set out to do. Like they have an idea, but as soon as you get out to the real world and the marketplace kicks you in your face, you don't know what you have, right? It's just on paper. So you've got to have a vision and people got to believe on that vision. The second part of that is you got to know a little bit how to get there, right? You can't just go, hey, we're going to go tackle that mountain. And people go, all right, great. How are we going to do that? And you're like, I don't know. We're just going to go figure it out. It doesn't work.
Right.
Right. And you don't have to have all the sketchy details, right? But it's you've got to be able to know, if I'm going to go from here and drive to Florida to come see you, Marcy, then I need to know a little bit of how I need to get there, like what direction, what ideas I'm going to take there. I don't need to know every gas station I'm going to stop at or every hotel I'm going to stay in, but I need to know the general direction and a general flow of how I'm going to get there, right? And then I think the third thing that's probably the most important is people really need to believe that you want them along on that journey with you.
Mhm.
And so you have those three: vision, how to get there, and then that you want to have people come along with you. And if you really ingrain that in the core beliefs of your company at the very beginning, then everything else that comes after that is just subsequent and really doesn't hold a whole lot of weight. I don't think we spend enough time really defining a vision and how to get there. I think we spend a lot of time on ideas and this would be cool and this would be awesome. And if we did this, we'd make this monetary gain, instead of going like, okay, we're trying to solve a problem. What does that end result look like to the consumer? And what does our company look like if we ultimately solve that? And then they don't backfill that.
Mhm. Chris, I am, I teach writing to a lot of people, and we always have to have a vision when you're starting to write. But I use that analogy of taking a road trip. I'm
Mhm.
like, you got to plan it out. You've got to, like pretend you're going to LA, right? Are you going to stop in 3 cities? You're going to stop in 5 cities? You're going to spend 2 nights to do it? It's like just kind of idea of coming up with a framework. And
Mhm.
of course, when you're writing, it's always about the audience. But what you're telling me is it's also creating the audience. Your employees are your audience for your vision, and then getting them to come on board with it. And that just is the magic of storytelling. So, can you give me any ideas about how you might share your vision in a way that really gets them excited?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, going with what you said, when you're what you want to become, and this is a problem that I see a lot of entrepreneurs or business people, they go out and they're hunting, right? They're going to find stuff. That's not what you want to be. I want you to think about like a comedian, a country singer, or your favorite singer, whatnot. They go from city to city and they play for all these different venues, but they have their own style and they attract people that want to listen to them. They don't
Mhm.
go and change their style based on the demographic or the geography of where they're at. Really good businesses attract people, and they're good attractors of consumers, and they're great attractors, most importantly, of employees who believe the same things they do. So being able to tell a story and cast a vision is probably the most important integral role of a leader. In fact, I think, there's even if I remember correctly, there's a Bible verse, Proverbs 29:18, where it says, where there is no vision, people will perish, right? And that is such a profound quote because when the leader does not cast that vision correctly and people do not know what direction they're marching in or even why they're marching in that direction, you lose everything. That's when those little bit of like problems become major catastrophes, right? Because now people don't know how to handle the small little problems when when you're not there as an entrepreneur, when you're not there as a leader, and they're going, "Oh, we need our leader. We don't know the answer to this question," and then they don't know because we didn't cast a vision right. So if casting a vision and telling a story is the most important thing a leader can do, then the art of the storytelling is the single most important skill somebody can have,
That
right?
is so true.
And I think good storytelling has to have a framework. You have to have a framework for storytelling. And I think you should have, as a leader, you should cultivate somewhere between 15 to 30 stories that relate to your business and you as a person and your character that you can whip out at any given time that you've rehearsed and you've wrote down that you've done. Like you need to be a presenter yourself as a leader, right? And you see this from these companies. If you actually go look at Main Street, you can see companies that have a founder that is generally like maybe introvert or socially awkward or whatnot, and they go hire coaches like y'all, and they go hire a lot of people to help them tell stories, and you can see them mature over time when they're giving presentations, when they're giving interviews and everything else. They become more personable by nature, right? Because they have these stories. And I think a good story needs to be very, 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 it needs to be truthful in its first. And I don't think a lot of people realize that it needs to be truthful and it needs to be very personal, right? It needs to talk about how you came across this and you had this epiphany that, right? And I call it the epiphany bridge. It's like, hey, I ran into this problem. I did not know how to solve it. I tried to solve it A, B, C, D. And it wasn't until I X'd and then when I X'd, I saw that, wait a minute, this is actually might work. And then I doubled down on it. And then here's the outcome. And this is exactly how I got there.
Mhm.
Right. Because stories are how people like learn. I mean, it's ingrained in us since we were before we could read or write, right? We told stories around the campfire to people. It's genetic. I mean, your kids don't sit down at you at the end of the night and go, hey, write me a story, Dad. They go, tell me the story, right? And so those voices, those caricatures, those things that we do is innately in us. And unless we can actually become better storytellers ourselves, and I'm not just talking about interviewing people and hearing books or anything else, I'm actually talking about being able to take somebody and captivate them and keep them curious through each leg of those phase. I call it the dominoes phase. You're trying to tip over that first domino because if you tip over that first domino and catch that curiosity at the beginning, all the rest of the dominoes will fall in your story.
So, Chris, how did you start to discover your own stories? You mentioned writing them down, practicing them, but cultivating them and trying to identify which stories you should have in your arsenal? How did you start that practice?
That probably when I was in high school, I'll be honest. I was a jock. I was a football player. I was pretty good. Went and played college ball and stuff. But and this was back in the '90s, and I'm old. In between my sophomore and my junior year, let me backtrack. I always knew, there's kids and they go, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a doctor, everything. I always knew I wanted to be a CEO. Since the moment I can actually recall thinking, I always wanted to own businesses. And so when I was going through my developmental phases through, grade school and through high school, when I was in high school, I realized that I had a natural leadership ability, but I didn't know things. I didn't structure things correctly, right? And so I actually put myself in debate. And anybody back in the day that was a jock and knows anything, you a football player and you go in debate, get made fun of by a bunch of different people. Debate was not very popular back then. So I put myself in Lincoln Douglas debate, which allowed me to articulate moral arguments and not policy arguments that is in the other standard debate. And so I was able to look and really reflect on the philosophies of life I had and really cultivate a vision of how I see myself in the world. And so I think that's the first thing most people need to do is they need to take a step back and go, how do I see myself in this world? How do I view the world around me? And I think that's important because unless you get people that believe that same viewpoint, it'll never work out. I've been married for 21 years, and my wife and myself could not be more diametrically opposed in our likes and dislikes. We are completely opposite when it comes to our proclivities of what we like or don't, but how we view the world, how we view our place in the world, how we view our place as a family, as a husband and wife, with God, with our children, and how we do that is exactly the same. So those fundamental values is what real good storytelling is. And I think a good storytelling is like crafting. It's like, okay, here is my story. Here's what I'm trying to articulate with this. Here is a time in my life that I thought that I was gonna just lose it, right? For instance, I have had, as of this date, I've had about 22 businesses. About 6 or 7 of them have been home runs. We've had about a couple of $100 million in exits, but I've had about 5 or 6 of them that almost bankrupt me at the time, right? And then there's a whole bunch of businesses in between that you can flip a coin if they're worth it monetarily, they were worth it from a business learning perspective. But that's how it fleshed out. And when I go back and I look at stuff and I go, how did I lose on these? I had an idea. I went through the same process, what I did, and every single one of them, I was outside of my circle of competency, right? And so taking that about what I felt about and being open and honest and going, I thought this, I thought this, I thought I could do this, but here's what it really was because I didn't understand it. I thought I knew it, but I truly didn't understand it. Those nuances that really make businesses, that turns into a story. So a lot of my stories are cautionary tales about like how to avoid things that can cause you harm. And because I think we talk too much about the things that are exciting, because they're exciting. Momentum, movement, innovation, all this stuff. It's exciting. It's fun to talk about. Nobody wants to talk about the boring stuff. Nobody wants to talk about, hey, what it actually requires is those 10, 20, 15 hours a day of doing the same thing. To be really, really good, you have to be able to be very patient. You like watch paint dry. If you can sit in a room and watch paint dry and be alone with yourself, you're going to be a good business person one of these days.
Well, it's funny because it just circles right back to your leadership story. So if you can, get people to be vulnerable and get people to know how to, share their story with authenticity, knowing their purpose of what they are on the team, it's how the whole, it's how you unite to rally around the vision, share the vision, and then figure out what was your second one? Like how to get there. Like the team is kind of figuring that out, but without the element of storytelling, which for you, what I'm hearing, like, because I'm a student of storytelling. Allison's much better at it than I am. But for me, I'm always like, what makes when I listen to somebody, I remember our conversation versus when I don't, it usually has to do with that blueprint that you said. It starts with it's a personal why, it's a personal experience, and that level of honesty, vulnerability, and sharing in a way where that first domino gets me hooked. And even if you lose track because it's the corner, you can kind of still get them there. And that's a great that's something I'm really learning from this conversation as it relates to leadership and storytelling. So powerful. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to ask a question. So we do have, our above center, methodology of how we work with our clients and stuff. And to give a little bit of background in this conversation before I ask you for your quote. So there's a lot of alignment to what you share and how we believe. So we kind of have put a line in the middle, and above the center is like confidence, it's belief, it's hopefulness. Below center might be doubt, shame, fear, guilt, negativity. But above center, to be there, we always say you got to have a great vision, like you said. And then we say aligned action, which is very similar to like, what are the actions to get there? You know, how many gas stations are you going to stop at? But if you fall below center and you're feeling this retreat and this, insecurity, I'm not enough, or I can't do this, you have a choice to respond below center or pause and think, well, what is an above center action that's more aligned to my vision of who I want to be more often, how I'm going to solve my customer problems. So that's kind of like in theory how it works. All right. So you have an above center quote that when you sent it to us, I was so excited about it because it really is like when something bad happens, that 10% bad, you have a choice of how to respond. And tell us your quote because you don't want to respond below center. But
Yeah,
that's your quote.
I got my mug that has that y'all are so nice to send me, but it's the height of wisdom is the avoidance of stupidity. And I think a lot of people like get knowledge and wisdom mixed up. If you think about, I want you to think about everybody you consider wise. They're generally older, right? They generally have had a lot of life experiences. And when they give you a piece of advice and you're like, that's really good advice, most of it is about what not to do. If you really, really think about what wisdom is and the little nuggets that we do, it's guidelines about what not to do. Just look at the Bible, the Ten Commandments. They are all like, thou shalt not, right? They didn't say, hey, go do this. It says, hey, don't do this, right? And I picked up on that when I was younger, but one of my, probably my favorite mentor in my life and the person that I have read the most about is Charlie Munger, the great Charlie Munger. He was and he introduced me to inversion theory. And inversion is really like whatever you're thinking about, like just reverse it. So instead of going, hey, what would make my wife happy? Which gives you all these possibilities, right? If I pulled up 5 guys right here and go, hey, and ask them all like, hey, what makes your wife happy? Every one of them have a different answer. And most of them would start off with like what day of the week it is, right? It all depends. We'd have multiple different answers. However, if I said, hey, how would you make your wife divorce you? We'd all come up with the same answers, like be unfaithful, go out and hang out all night, treat her with disrespect, not listen to concerns. We'd all come up with the same. So when you look at this field of possibilities, it's a lot easier instead of like, what way should I go? Instead of go, what way should I not go? Right. And that's what I mean when it comes down to that quote where like the height of wisdom is the avoidance of stupidity. It's amazing what can happen in this world if you just do good things consistently and simple things consistently and just avoid doing stupid things. Right. And I think that's where real leadership comes in. It's like simplifying everything because we live in a very complex world. Businesses are complex. Look at y'all's business. Y'all are growing it. Y'all are doing different things. And think about all the decisions you have to talk about on a daily basis. How much easier is it if you define like, these are the things we're not going to do? And you have a litmus test to judge everything by. And I think that's where a lot of people do not go above center is they really do not define the codes, principles, the vision of the company, and the things that are most important. Like, we're not going to do this. It's not part of what we want to do. We're going to stay far away. It's not that it's not a good idea, but we just realize that that is not going to be good for us. It makes decisions easy. And what you're looking for in business is no-duh decisions.
Right.
Too often we're juggling too many things, and it's like, we're juggling cats with knives and Molotov cocktails and everything else. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. If you look at most leaders and most entrepreneurs, they're firefighters, right? They think about it. But if you look at the most successful, I mean, I'm talking about the upper echelon, most successful, they have figured out a way to simplify what they do and stay consistent with that simplified message. And that's the most important part. If you think about everything in life, it kind of derives from that. Like, for instance, weight loss, right? How many thousands of different diets in diet books? When it really comes down to 2 principles, walk a little bit more every day and eat a little bit less. That's
More
it.
veggies, more exercise.
That's it. That's the most simple first principle thing you can get down into, right? It's like, hey, just do that. And then you can break it and go, okay, well, how do I make sure that happens, right? These are the things that cause me to not agree to those principles. Just don't do those. Just remove it and remove them at their core. Remove them at their core. Don't go to a fast food restaurant, right? Clean out all the junk food right now of your pantry and just don't buy any, right? Instead of going, well, because we negotiate with ourselves, right? We think we have more willpower than we actually do. And here's the thing. Humans are not capable of willpower. We're facing millennium of biology saying, hey, sit your butt on the couch and get fat because here's some easily accessible food. You don't have to go hunt and gather any longer, right? So we're very, very, very much prone to not having willpower. In fact, if you think about it, if we're so good at willpower, why do we admire people who have strong willpower, right?
Mhm.
So that's how I look at that stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, and that's circling back to, in the beginning part of this conversation, like you have to have a good vision. And if you don't have that good vision around like, hey, what are the problems we're going to solve for our customer? If if you're not sharing that vision often, people that you hire 3 years later, they don't share that same vision. So when they have a problem, they're quickly below center and they exaggerate how bad the problem is instead of, kind of in your world, like meet me above center with this vision and we're going to figure this out because we're not going to say this problem's impossible. We're not going to retreat from the customer. We're not going to make it bigger than it needs to be. But it's easy to kind of, when I was listening to your advice, it's easy for me to quickly think like if you had the to don't list, like these are the things we're not going to do, it just helps people recognize when they're feeling below center and they're responding and doing stupid things, they become aware of these are the behaviors I don't want. Like a simple one is really like when somebody is stressed, sometimes
Mhm.
they do go to the bad habits of laziness. It may include like drinking, which then kind of gets them to maybe eat some more chips or sleep
Yeah.
in or not work out. And there, if you kind of get that clarity of, you know, I just love that the theory of inversion and figuring out how to just kind of like, what is it? What's really what we're not going to do? And that just gets you more clear, so then you stay more at that height of wisdom.
I think we need a good companies have fences, right? Because you want like really good companies promote and foster ideas, right? But those ideas, you can't just let people just run a wild. If they don't, they need to be structured in a way, right? And I use the example of like it's like your kids. Like you want your kids to play because play is very important for development, and it's just fun. They're kids, right? But you don't just like your young kids. You don't just shoot them out the back door and go have fun. You build a fence in your backyard and go, hey, I don't care what you do, have a good time. Don't leave this yard. Don't go over that fence. You got to build those fences, and so that's why, like, if you build the fences, that's where it's like, hey, the structure that you need. And I also believe that, you had mentioned this. It's like when you're feeling down, when you're feeling tired, when you've got anxiety, when you don't know which way to turn, like how do you get, if you're below center, how do you get back to above center? Well, I think that a lot of people in business are chasing stuff, but and they're not subscribing to higher principles. And what I mean by that is I kind of mentioned that duty is my fundamental guiding principle as a leader. If you think about what that means to me, it's that whenever anything's going bad, where's my lighthouse in the storm? Like, where is my center that I can navigate back towards? If I have something that I subscribe that's higher than me, then guess what? Now I can go, hey, I have a focal point and I can
Mhm.
move right there. It's like, it doesn't matter how I feel. Oh, you're not feeling that good. You're a little bit moody today. You really don't feel like work. Okay, well, if I don't do this, then I have 7 other people that are relying on me to get this done. I got to do it, right?
Yeah.
I can't, oh, you're sick and you're tired and you really are bedridden. Well, you have this important XYZ to get done. If it does not get done, it can affect the company, which can affect, 5, 6, 10, 20 other people. I've got to
Mhm.
do it, right? Hey, somebody calls in and they're having problems at home and they're missing work. You can take the tack of, hey, I'm really upset that I'm not getting this production from this person. Or you can take the tact of, I hired this person, they're in my care in my stead. It
Mhm.
is my duty to make sure that I hired the whole person, not just the work version of that person. How can I lead them and help them out of that situation that they're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
That's why and it doesn't have to be duty. It can be 1,000 other values or things, but you have to subscribe to something higher because that's the social contract we all have with each other. That's why we live in societies. That's why we do the things. We give up a little bit of ourselves for something that's more important to us. And the moment you can do that and articulate to your people about that, that's where a great culture comes from.
Yeah. And right now, unfortunately, the curse of most cultures right now is busyness. And
Hmm.
busyness is making people like show up at a meeting slightly unprepared, maybe a minute late, not really like that intentional on the outcome of this meeting that we need to have. And those types of things are so important. So I love what you're saying because combine the point of view you have with that duty or your higher purpose and combine that with storytelling if people are vulnerable and they know who you are, and this is my duty, this is who my vision is, this is who I am, when you're not acting that way, and our lens like below center, if you're not acting that way, you'll have, you know, other people on your team be like, hey, Chris, are you okay? You're acting a little stressed. You're seeming, do you need a break? Can I help you? But the more people allow their full self to be there at work with a clear vision, when they're kind of off course, some are like, all right, come back in. How can I help you? So this has been such a great conversation. I'd love to just, kind of end it with one last question for you, which, could be like a bigger question, but if you had one advice for somebody that's sitting there with this, maybe I could start a company. They've got this idea, they've got this little, they've got they're starting to get appropriately obsessed with solving this problem, feeling they could do something. How would you encourage them going from idea to getting started?
So I think people pontificate too much on what they should do or what they can do rather than just doing. And the thing that I found out through all my years is nothing's you're going to replace just getting going and just having movement. And I think people, when they're looking and thinking about ideas of what they should do, they need to, they need to step back, because a lot of people get in this phase of like, can I do this? Right. And it's more of a question of like, should I do this? And a good quote from Warren Buffett was, the boat you're in is more important than how hard you row. And thinking about what you're going to do and what vehicle, and if is this going to solve a problem, and understanding the dynamics and going, should I do this instead of can I do this? Right. And that's a lot of things. A lot of people go, I can do this. I can do this. I really, if we go invest this money and I go raise this and I go do this, we can go do this. It's like, well, should you? Are you solving the right problems? Is it going to meet your needs? Are you just trying to be inventive so you can make money? Like, should you? It's that first Jurassic Park movie. And they said that it's like y'all were so busy wondering if you could do this, nobody would step back and say like, should you create dinosaurs? Right? You're sitting here. Should we create them? They're like, well, can we create them? It's like, should we? And I think a lot of people need to spend more time in that phase. Because if you think about a lot of entrepreneurs when they first begin and they think about things that don't matter. Like, what's the company name and what's the logo and what's all of this stuff? And it's all this stuff that really doesn't matter. It's like, hey, am I going to solve a market niche problem that's going to have expounded results? And can I use my leadership abilities and my capabilities to design a company that's going to solve that problem better than anybody else? And if you can't articulate that in a sentence or two, you shouldn't do it. But to answer your question directly, the moment that somebody goes, I think I should do it, they've got to just do it. Like, they pontificate, they think too much. Everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, right? You've got to put in the reps to see the market acceptance of your idea and that your rationale is right, right? And what I would also say, do not approach anything as a binary solution. Do not go, hey, I'm going to go do this and it's a pass fail. You should approach everything as a scientist. I have a hypothesis. This is what I think is going to happen. And then you've got to measure what the results are. That result is never going to be, hey, a right or a wrong or a pass or a fail in a marketplace. It's going to be, hey, you might have not missed the mark, you might have succeeded, but you also have the hat of a magnitude effect. You have to go, oh, this didn't work. How much did it not work? Right? Going back to that weight loss example, when we were talking about that, if somebody goes, I'm overweight, well, magnitude matters. If you're 5 pounds overweight versus 100 pounds overweight, the remedy is completely different, right? And so we don't talk about that enough, of going, hey, this won or this lost by how much, and then going why. And then you have to go backtrack and go, did the fundamental principles of the problem I'm solving change? Okay. If the fundamental underlying marketplace or principles that I was trying to solve did not change, then it's a solution-oriented problem. You chose the wrong solution to the problem, right? In whatever variation that is. If the fundamentals did change while you were solving it, then you have to readdress and go, hey, should I try to solve this problem again? And I think we spend too much time theorizing and thinking instead of just getting practical application and getting quick feedback loops. And I think that's the most important part of things today. It used to be that we had a specialized economy and you had specialized knowledge. Now I think you're going to more generalized knowledge. And so with specialized economy, you have to get specialists involved, you have to get data points, you have to get insight, and it takes a little bit of while for you to collect the feedback. I think good entrepreneurs and leaderships now are instilling quick feedback loops so they can get the information they need and make decisions, micro adjustments. We use that, Allison, you and I used the idea about the trip earlier, like, hey, the map to the trip. Well, I want you to think about what you do when you take a trip like that. You might have a handful of big changes, i.e., I'm going down this interstate, then I've got to go all the way over to this interstate. That's a big change. But if you think about the majority of the trip, 95, 99% of the trip, it's staying on the highway and making little thousands of micro adjustments to keep on that same road, right? Having those quick feedback loops means that you don't have to pivot as much. You can make little small changes as you go, but you can't do that if you've got this 18-page business plan
Right.
to do it that you want to stick to. Stick to
Yeah.
your goals and your milestone, adapt the plan as it goes along.
Well, that's the idea of just starting and getting some quick wins under your belt. You gain a little bit of confidence and you start to understand the market. Chris, this has been such an exciting conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Above Center podcast.
Thank you very much, ladies. I appreciate y'all.
So you must have loved that portion of the interview with the storytelling.
Oh my goodness. Yes, of course. And the roadmap, it's exactly what I do.
Well, it's so true. And then, he was saying, he's like, you got to have, 14, I think he said 14 stories, but we always talked about having those pocket stories. So then that way, at any moment, they're predictable stories. You need to tell in different scenarios, but teaching your employees how to do that. I think that's such a gift. If I were working for Chris, that he would teach you how to do that. And then that way it's just your way of personalizing the vision and moving on from there. I also loved when he was like talking about his above center quote and how it really is that bottom right box that we always say, try to avoid that box, because the box and the behaviors that are seen by others, if they're not what you want others to see, if you just had that list of stupidity, maybe that's what we should put at the bottom. The bottom right is just stupidity.
Instead of the to don't list, it's the stupidity list.
Or change it. I don't know if we're allowed to change our branding. The trademark already exists, but next time.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's absolutely. And one final thing is he was talking about Jurassic Park, maybe not a good idea. And they just announced the dire wolf is back. So that's been gone for 10,000 years. So anyway, well, here we are.
Here we are, 2025. Well, always fun to be with you, Allison.
Always fun to be with you, because it's better together. Learn more at therevelcompanies.com.
That was fun.